We still have a ways to go until the offseason, but one name that's been on the minds of many baseball fans out there is Roki Sasaki. Who's Roki Sasaki, you might ask? Well, let's just say he could end up being the next best pitcher out of Japan, and very well could end up being the greatest pitcher of all time from Japan. He averages near 100 miles per hour on his fastball and pairs this with a ridiculous splitter and a wicked slider. Also has good command of all of his pitches. Over 4 pro seasons in Japan, he's pitched in 64 games, tossing over 380 innings with an ERA of 2.01, 11.5 strikeouts per 9, and 2 walks per 9. These numbers are right in line with other greats coming from Japan like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, Masahiro Tanaka, and Yu Darvish. Now the question is, will his team in Japan, the Chiba Lotte Marines, post him this upcoming offseason? Now, I did go into detail about this in a separate video. You could see that video up here somewhere, but it's not a guarantee he'll be posted. Because he's not 25 yet and he hasn't pitched enough seasons in Japan, he's still considered an international amateur. Because of that, teams can only use their international bonus pool money to sign him, and with the biggest pool coming in at around $7.5 million, he won't be getting a contract like a normal international free agent would get on the open market, like Yoshinobu Yamamoto last year when his old team, the Buffaloes, got back more than $50 million in a posting fee for him. This means that the posting fee the Marines would get back would be extremely slim to what they would get back if they posted him in a normal manner if he had met the age or service time requirement. Now, with Shohei Ohtani, who was also considered an international amateur when he was posted, his situation was a bit different. He had a clause in his Ohtani, who was also considered an international amateur when he was posted. His situation was a bit different. He had a clause in his contract to where he could be posted at any time, and his old team, the Ham Fighters, were able to get back $20 million because that was the maximum posting fee at the time. Today, the posting fee is based off a percentage off the contract agreed upon. As for Sasaki, he has expressed a desire to pitch in the major leagues though, and there supposedly was an agreement between Sasaki and the Marines that he would be posted early, but there also seemed to be a disagreement about what early actually meant. To add on to that, according to Jeff Passan, he reported this past week that because of this, the relationship between Sasaki and the Marines is damaged, and it's unknown if they'll follow through on posting him early or not. However, for the sake of this video, let's say they figure it out and Sasaki ends up getting posted and comes over to the major leagues this coming offseason. I'm going to go over some teams that I think, at least as of right now, would have the best shot at signing him. Let's get to it. Now, before I get to the teams, let's go over what I think are going to be the most important factors in Sasaki choosing a team. Because teams would only be using their international pool money, money is not going to be a huge factor here. What it's really going to come down to, at least in my opinion, is the organization's environment, or which organization he thinks would give him the best chance to succeed on a personal level. I also think a big factor would be which team would give him the best chance to win, not just now, but over the next several years. So, which organizations have not just good teams now, but also have strong farm systems. So, with that said, let's get into it. Let's get the easy one out of the way first, and that's the team everyone is expecting Sasaki to sign with, the Dodgers. Remember last year when Ken Rosenthal wrote an article for The Athletic saying that players from Japan didn't really want to play with each other because of the seniority in Japan's hierarchical culture? Well, that ended up being false as Yamamoto ended up joining Ohtani, and after all the smoke had cleared, we ended up finding out the Dodgers were pretty much his first choice all along. So, with Sasaki, I mean, would anyone be surprised if he went to the Dodgers at this point? Now, of course, they have Ohtani and Yamamoto. They're always in contention because of their money and farm system. They're on the West Coast, which is popular for Japanese players. They have a rich history in signing Japanese talent, and that market also offers a lot of off-the-field opportunities for Sasaki, which could help alleviate the lack of a big contract that he'll end up getting. Because of all this, the Dodgers are an obvious landing spot for Sasaki. However, I'll play a little devil's advocate here. Look at all the injuries the Dodgers have been sustaining the last couple of years, including this year with Yamamoto's shoulder. Now, with Sasaki having his own injuries this year with his arm, perhaps that could be something that comes into play to discourage him from going there. Another thing to point out is a strength the Dodgers usually have, and that's what I mentioned earlier, the money. Since the Dodgers won't be able to offer any massive contracts, they are a little handcuffed there. I'll also point out what I did say a little earlier, which ended up being false with Yamamoto, and that was what Ken Rosenthal said about players from Japan and not wanting to play with each other. Who knows? Maybe that comes into play here as well, because Sasaki has gotten a lot of hype over the years, so maybe he wants to end up going somewhere where he could be his own man. In the end, though, I would not be surprised one bit if Sasaki ends up joining the Dodgers, but I'll also say it's not a complete slam dunk. It's going to come down to if he thinks the Dodgers offer him the best chance to succeed in his career, both on a team level and on an individual level, and the only person that can decide that is Roki Sasaki. Let's go from a team with possibly the best chance to a team that probably has the lowest chance, the Detroit Tigers. Now, we know the Tigers have to do something with their offense, but hey, it would not hurt at all to add an arm like Sasaki to go with Tarek Skubal. Now, would the Tigers have a chance here, though? Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible. They have a lot of international pool money to work with, and they've had a lot of success with their pitching development in recent years, as they rank in the top 10 in starting pitching Fangraph wins above replacement over that time. Another thing to think about is a signing they made last year with Kenta Maeda, who just so happens to be from Japan. Sure, he hasn't had a great year, but to have a native of your country in the same clubhouse could go a long way, especially a veteran like Maeda. Now, again, Detroit is probably unlikely, but I could see a scenario where he likes what they have to offer in terms of pitching development. He has that comfort with a veteran Japanese native in Kenta Maeda, and he could always access a bigger market when he gets to free agency down the road. The next team that I think could be very intriguing are the Mariners. Now, we know up to this point the Mariners can't hit the side of a barn, but man, oh man, they can freaking pitch over there. They've done such a good job with the pitching in their organization. I mean, look at all the homegrown talent they've been able to develop. George Kirby and Logan Gilbert have been amazing this year, while Bryce Miller and Brian Wu have both taken big steps this year as well. Not many teams out there can say they've developed almost an entire rotation. I would imagine that would catch the eye of Sasaki. Now, it's not just that. There's also the money aspect. The Mariners have never really been a team where they like to throw around a ton of money. They're usually trying to avoid that. So you've got to think here that because they won't have to break the bank, they're probably going to be very motivated, and they have a good chunk of international pool money to play with for 2025. To top all that off, though, they had this one guy by the name of Ichiro for many years. He was pretty good. Don't know if you remember him or not. So, yeah, that can't hurt. Let's head east a little bit and talk about the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, when you think of international signings from Japan, the Cardinals haven't really had a ton of those, but they did sign So Taguchi back in the day, and he did help them win a World Series in 2006, so there's that. There's also current player Lars Nootbaar. Now, he wasn't an international signing, but he is of Japanese descent, and he did play for Japan in the WBC last year. However, what I think is the most important thing here is the Cardinals' motivation to sign him. When it comes to pitching development, there hasn't been a whole lot to show for in the last couple of years, but there are a couple of signs they're moving in the right direction. I think signing Sonny Gray last year was a signal in changing their approach to pitching, as his Stuff Plus ranks well over the last couple of years. They've also started to see some pitchers in the minor leagues take steps forward as well, like Tank Hens, Quinn Matthews, Cooper Jerpy, and others. On top of all this, they did scout one of Sasaki's starts this past year, and while I do think other teams probably have a better chance, at least as of right now, I think if the Cardinals get their foot in the door, I think they could be a dark horse. Let's talk about the Cardinals' arch rivals, the Chicago Cubs. Now, I think the Cubs could be very interesting here because they check off a good amount of boxes. It's an organization that's brought in Shota Imanaga this past year and Seiya Suzuki a couple of years ago, so they already have that comfort factor in place. What I think is the most important, though, is they've revamped their pitching development in the last few years, and they rank in the top 10 in Fangraph wins above replacement with their starting pitching over the last couple of years. And also, getting back to Imanaga, look how good this guy has been in his first year in Chicago. I would imagine Sasaki has taken notice of that. On top of all this, the Cubs have one of the best farm systems in the game, so they are set up for future success. It's a good baseball market as well. I think the Cubs are very interesting. Speaking of pitching development, let's talk about a team that's completely revamped the pitching development in their organization. My Red Sox. You know Giraffe Neck Robbie was going to show up here, but I got a few good reasons to think they have a shot at Sasaki. Now, last offseason they hired Craig Breslow, who has an eye for pitching, to run the show in Boston, and shortly after he completely changed everything, he hired Kyle Boddy, the founder of Driveline Baseball, to be a special advisor for the pitching development within their organization. He brought in Andrew Bailey as the new pitching coach, who also did a great job with the Giants before coming to Boston. And also, like I said earlier, because money wouldn't be a big factor here, you know the Red Sox are going to love that, especially with how limited they've been in the last couple of years when it comes to spending money in free agency. There's also the history they have with Japanese talent, the main one being Daisuke Matsuzaka, who did win a World Series there in 2007. They also did meet with Yamamoto last offseason, and while that didn't really get anywhere, they did at least get a foot in the door, so that's got to mean something, right? Shifting over to the Red Sox arch rivals, the Yankees, and I expect the Yankees to be big players here for Sasaki, as they were a finalist last year for Yamamoto. Now, of course, they are the Yankees at the end of the day, and even if you hate the Yankees, they have the pinstripes, which have a whole heck of a lot of weight. Because of that, Sasaki will probably have a lot of opportunities when it comes to making money off the field, and that would help, especially with the limited contract that he's going to be getting. It's not just that, though. They have a good history with signing Japanese talent, with the big addition being Masahiro Tanaka. Another thing to mention is the one factor I've mentioned a couple of times, the money. Well, I don't think that's going to be a big factor here, like I've said a couple of times already. I do want to point out that they did make a trade at the deadline by sending Caleb Ferguson to the Astros, which also brought back a good chunk of international pool money. Now, I'm not saying an extra $750,000 is going to get them to sign Sasaki, but it could very well signal they're gearing up to make a run at him. And last but not least, let's talk about the other team in New York, the Mets. Now, when we think of the Mets and Steve Cohen, we think about the money. But like I've said, money is not a big factor here, so Cohen's main strength is a bit handcuffed. This is where the Mets are going to have to rely on convincing Sasaki that they have the best environment for him to succeed. One thing they have to try and convince him is that other talented pitcher from Japan they have, Kadai Senga, who's had immediate success with the Mets. Now, he did end up having injuries this year and basically missed the entire season, so maybe that could be an issue, but nonetheless, Senga is a great reason for why Sasaki could be tempted to go to the Mets, because they showed they could have him transition over to the major leagues pretty much seamlessly. And also, don't forget, they were a player in the Yamamoto sweepstakes last year. Yeah, they did miss out on him, but I think that's going to make them extra motivated in this situation. Now, the Mets farm system has also gotten a lot better over the last few years, and don't forget, David Stearns has led successful pitching development in his career, with Corbin Burns, Devin Williams, and Freddie Peralta with the Brewers just being a few names to go off of. And the Mets have been able to have some guys in the minor leagues take step forwards this year, like Brandon Sproat and Christian Scott. In the end, I expect the Mets to be strong players here, but at the end of the day, if Sasaki does get posted, it's going to come down to where he feels the most comfortable. So those are my thoughts. Tell me what you think down below in the comments. If Sasaki does get posted this offseason, where do you think he ends up going? Which teams do you think have the best chance to sign him? But that's all I got for this video. Everyone, if you can, on the way out, hit that like button for me, subscribe if you're new, and I'll talk to you next time.